find some parts of it. And that's not going to go over easy with a lot of people, but I would remind everybody of what happened when Ronald Reagan took office. People thought you couldn't possibly have the inauguration on the western side of the Capitol. Well, that's what he did, and every president since then has done the same. You couldn't possibly name, Caspar Weinberger and, Al Haig, and remember these names from the past. Oh, these people were part of Watergate. Oh, these people are going to start a nuclear war. This can't happen. It can happen, and this is what people, 59, 60 million people, decided was going to happen.
So can he do away with the press pool that has traditionally been following a president for decades?
Well, look, I think he's going to find, like everyone would find, is that you've got to be able to communicate, and for better or worse, thanks to the First Amendment, thanks to the long traditions of this country, you've got to work with the press, or it's just not going to be worth it.
But so he can,
at the same time,
can ditch the pool. If he wants.
He can ditch the pool if he wants. There will be a consequence to that. I think they'll discover over time that it's not worth the negative feedback that you're going to get. And look, the whole exchange about Twitter. Hey, the press is inciting these people out in the streets. Well, that's a sign that you've got to get your communications and your messaging under control. And lo and behold, here's this big press pool that's here to help you do that.
Well, but people actually agree with him. I mean, there's a perception among his followers that the media lost in the election also, that he beat the media. He is keenly aware of that, and I don't think it's a coincidence that he put that in his tweet. Now, these tweets we're talking about, here's the one that just came out from President-elect Trump. Just had a very open and successful presidential election. Now professional protesters incited by the media are protesting. Very unfair. Here's Donald J. Trump, not president-elect, after the 2012 race when he wasn't happy about the outcome with Mitt Romney. We can't let this happen. We should march on Washington and stop this travesty. Our nation is totally divided. Philip Bump, what do you see?
Well, I would say that consistency has not been a hallmark of Donald Trump's candidacy or president-electness so far. I am alarmed by this, quite frankly. I think that Donald Trump has an opportunity now. He's already won. This is a moment of graciousness. This is the moment when you, as a winner, build a new relationship with people who voted against you. And that's not what that tweet does. What that tweet does is it continues to put a wall between the free press that exists in the United States and Trump supporters. It continues to reinforce that divide, and that is not helpful to Donald Trump as president. It's very much not helpful to the United States of America. And I think that what we're going to see here is that Donald Trump has consistently fought against the press. He has beaten the press, and instead of being gracious even with the press, he is taking a new direction. I totally get why it would be frustrating to win an election, then see riots literally outside of your door at Trump Tower in Manhattan. But that said, it is his responsibility to make the case for why he will not be the president that those people are afraid of. And I was in those protests, and it is not professional agitators. It is young people. It is people of color who are freaked out by President-elect Trump.
Right. I mean, it's called leadership, to try to quell the anxiety that people are feeling or the frustration.
Especially when you called for the same thing after the last election. It's a First Amendment right. And, by the way, it could be helpful to the president-elect. Let the protests happen. Show that you can be graceful about it. Show that you are now the biggest man in the room, that you rise above and let time pass. That's leadership.
Yesterday, Donald Trump and President Obama sat down together at the White House. It was this sort of jaw-dropping image for lots of people, possibly even President Obama. But President Obama said very encouraging things. He said that they had had an excellent conversation. And Donald Trump changed his tune radically about President Obama. Let's watch this moment.
We now are going to want to do everything we can to help you succeed, because if you succeed, then the country succeeds.
I very much look forward to dealing with the president in the future, including counsel. He explained some of the difficulties, some of the high-flying assets, and some of the really great things that have been achieved. So, Mr. President, it was a great honor being with you, and I look forward to being with you many, many more times in the future. Thank you, sir.
It was a great honor being with you, he said.
But that's what we should be seeing right now. That right there.
Although his followers might say, Jackie, that's BS. He doesn't believe that. Obama doesn't like him, and he doesn't like Obama. I voted for Trump because he doesn't play that game. How do you balance it?
They're entitled to that opinion. But Donald Trump said on election night he's a president for everyone. And that shows that he's willing to do that. shaking hands with the president, saying he's a good man. These things that actually is normal. That looked like a normal transition of power. And I think that's what settles nerves. That's what makes people who didn't vote for Donald Trump, who might be protesting in the streets and are scared, they need to see that Trump be a little bit more consistent to know it's going to be okay. And when he tweets later on that the media is inciting professional protesters or something, that is very dissonant to that. It looks like maybe was he acting, and that doesn't help the situation right now because the country is very divided, and it's his job to bring people together.
How do you make sense of it, Errol? I mean, journalists have a hard time with hypocrisy and have a hard time with discrepancies like that. We point that out. That's what we do for our professional living. So, after all of the things, the hateful things said about President Obama and President Obama returning some of the tone, what was that moment yesterday?
Well, I think, look, we normally see hard-fought, bitter campaigns. And let's think back to, 1988. Let's think back to 1992. This was a lot of rough words get said, and then you sort of bring it together, and you get the signs and the symbols of unity of the kind that we just saw yesterday. This went a little further outside the bounds, quite a bit further outside the bounds than we're used to seeing. But the fact that they're in the Oval Office, in the heart of American power, doing the things, even with sort of a grimace on their face, shows that the Republic is going to endure. And so that's a reassuring sign. That's a good first step. Obviously, when it comes to the policies, the personnel, the relationship with Congress, there are a lot of open questions that I think the press should focus on rather than getting hung up by a tweet that I think most people know is ridiculous. The notion that, the media in Seattle and Denver and Atlanta and New York all conspired.
But you're not worried. So that part, I hear you. The substance is ridiculous. But you're not worried that that's a harbinger of something very bad about to happen between the White House and the press?
Well, something interesting is going to happen. I mean, look, keep in mind, we've all sort of reported around the edges about this Trump TV, this notion of a media empire. A lot of times it was reported as if he loses, he'll start a media empire. But actually, if you look at what was really being put out there, is that he's going to form his own sort of channel in the event that he wins. So he's trying to figure out his communication strategy. We know it's going to involve social media in a way that never really was possible before. We know it's going to involve possibly this Trump TV thing, and it's going to also involve the politics of him being in an antagonistic relationship with the mainstream press, because that is part of his politics. His supporters love it. We all know, has a different kind of relationship. He sort of has some understanding of the inner workings of what it is we do, and has sort of played that to his advantage. It's going to be a sorting out period.
Are you worried or as sanguine as Errol?
No, less so. I think that what's being described there, part of the challenge we've seen over the course of this election cycle